Darkcast Network. Indie pods with a dark side.
Are you looking for your next true crime podcast? Do you crave stories that have mystery and suspense? Well, look no further. Introducing Love and Murder, the podcast that dives deep into the world of relationships gone horribly wrong. Every week, I take you on a journey through the dark side of love, where passion turns into obsession, families become enemies, and romance turns to murder. From mysterious mysteries to suspenseful suspense, I dive deep into cases of love gone wrong. So why should you listen to Love and Murder? Because this is not just another true crime podcast. We're your partners in crime.
Not guilty!
Your storytellers and your weekly dose of suspenseful entertainment. How many times have I said suspenseful? So what are you waiting for? Join the Love and Murder family and become part of the Lamb community. Tune in every week for a new episode that will keep you hooked. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button now. Love and Murder, because you're either someone's last love or their first murder.
Love and Murder, available on all major podcast platforms. Not for true crimers under 18. Must be an apple juice drinking enthusiast, but not really. Side effects include enjoying another true crime podcast, becoming a lamb, learning logic and how to deal with your problems in a healthy manner, and not turning to murder. Waiting for the next episode of Love and Murder to drop every week. Visit our website at www.murderandlove.com.
And remember, all love and no murder. See you soon.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, Heather. How are you?
Y'all means all. How you doing, Dylan?
Y'all is a very inclusive word. I agree.
Yes.
Y'all means all. I like that.
How you doing, bud?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you?
I'm very well.
You're very well as well.
I'm very well, thank you.
Nice. All right. So
It's been a nice weekend.
It's been a great weekend.
It really has been a great weekend. I feel like we needed a good weekend.
Fun with friends, good times together, caught some great true crime stuff together.
We should talk about, so we have like a new obsession. We recently learned to play Texas Hold'em.
Yes, we did.
With our friends. So we've had poker nights. We've had 2 poker nights.
Yeah.
And we were playing poker for like 5 hours last night and totally lost track of time.
I feel like I'm an expert now.
I know. You were winning big jackpot. You had like 50 pennies over there.
Now, granted, we were playing for fun, not for any kind of money, but it's just really fun.
It was fun. I never knew that card games were so fun.
Yeah, we were playing Texas Hold'em, which is, all the rage. Yeah, we're late to the party. I know that, but it's still
I know,
fun.
like people started playing that like years ago.
I think it was like a decade ago it got popular.
It's true.
Anywho, great time, good times. And and now we're here to have good times with our listeners. Yeah.
It's true.
I've been thinking about this all day.
Texas Hold'em and true crime.
That's right. I feel like that could be a podcast.
It probably could be. Dylan, are you ready to get into today's case? We have a lot to cover.
We have a lot to cover. I know if our listeners listen to the midweek, they're like, what case is it? Because we refuse to tell them what it is. It's all you need to know is it's a wonderful case.
Well, now they know because they've seen the
Well, maybe they did.
The name of the episode.
A lot of times I just push play on my favorite pods. I don't even read the title. So let's get into it. There's a lot to cover.
Okay, Dylan, there was an anonymous quote in a newspaper. I thought we could begin the episode with this quote.
Okay.
Quote, Robeson County is hell. If you want to pull over to the side of the road for a nap and wake up, you don't do it in Robeson County.
I think that's good advice, actually, after everything I've learned.
Yeah, so for those of you who are regular listeners, you may remember our Lumberton 3 episode. We were talking at length about Robeson County and the myriad problems within that area.
It's something that affects a lot of areas. You have a depressed economic setting, job opportunities are very low paying wages and all that. And that just drugs and people having a hard time
crime.
Making it. And that just breeds these types of areas where crime just grows like a bacteria.
Okay,
wow.
Dylan. So that's very, very insightful.
Thank
On
you.
August 3rd of 1993, 35-year-old Hal Locklear, a carpenter from Marlborough County, South Carolina, decided to go fishing in a swampy creek in an area known as Gum Swamp.
Wow.
In the town of McCall. Marlborough County lies in an area known as the PD region, only 8 miles from the North Carolina border. It's a rural area with a population of around 2,000 residents.
That sounds like a pretty small community.
Locklear had grown up fishing in the swamp, especially around the P Bridge. In the weeks before, rain had raised the water level. As Locklear was examining the creek bed, just kind of checking it out, the water's raised, kind of looking for that good, maybe that honey hole where you're going to get in, get the good fish.
Yeah, the honey hole.
That's what my dad always calls it, the honey hole.
There's nothing makes a fisherman or a fisher person more happy is finding their sweet old honey hole.
Finding that honey hole full of trout. Well, as he's checking out the creek, Dylan, he makes a shocking discovery. The body of a man is draped over a tree limb.
And I'm sure that would just blow you away.
The victim has a gunshot wound to the chest. Badly decomposed, it is clear the victim has been outdoors for somewhere up to about 2 weeks. When investigators arrive, they search the area for clues. The body is taken for autopsy. Law enforcement checks missing persons reports, but they don't find a match. Dr. Sexton of Scotland County, North Carolina, performs the autopsy. He's the forensic pathologist who will be examining this victim. And due to the lack of identity and unclaimed body status, it is customary in that part of the state to cremate the remains.
Well, they made a fair point in the stuff we watched together. It doesn't surprise me that some places, if you receive remains in a very decomposed state, you know, they're not going to keep, if you will. They go ahead and get all the information they can and then cremate the remains. And that doesn't surprise me. But
well, yeah, they have an unclaimed body.
Right.
Unidentified. It's a John Doe at this point.
It's been in the water, near the water.
It's very badly, as you mentioned, decomposed. It's been in the water. They do everything they can.
A swamp environment at that. So yeah. That's just...
They actually, the Dr. Sexton actually removed the jaws and the hands for identification purposes. So he removes those. He's going to preserve them. Many in the area began speculating that the killer or killers would have been a local, and they would have needed to be a local to have the knowledge of the P Bridge area, as it was kind of off the beaten path. It wasn't the kind of place a random person would have just stumbled upon to drop a body. I mean, this was an area where you would kind of have to seek it out.
Right. It's not right off the road. You have to probably drive a mile or two off, up the trail, up a road or whatever.
And the creek was full of bends and had tons of branches and trees. So again, it's very unlikely someone threw the body in the water and it floated to this spot. It was more like someone had to carry this body out and put it in this part of the swamp.
Oh, okay. So it's not like it was thrown in way up the way and it drifted this way.
It doesn't seem to be the case, Dylan. A few days before the body was discovered, a red Lexus SC400 sports car turned up in the woods more than 60 miles away in Cumberland County. It was located about a quarter mile off the road by a passerby. The vehicle had been stripped. The speakers and radio were missing, the windows smashed, and the wheels were gone.
Yeah,
someone had stolen the tires.
It's like some cliche, something you see out of a movie. It's sitting on cinder blocks now.
It was clear the car had been purposefully vandalized. When Dr. Sexton performed the autopsy, he contacted law enforcement in Cumberland County to say there was an unidentified body and that it might have something to do with this sports car that's been recovered.
Now, I understand. I don't agree with it, but I understand stealing a car that has value, stripping what parts you can that, again, you can get rid of, sell, make a little money.
You understand that part? Because to me, that just seems like a lot of work for what?
Well, I don't know the value of said parts, and I don't know of a chop shop to sell these cars to. But the part I really, truly don't understand is the beating the cars up and like breaking the windows out and spray painting them. I'm like, what are you, 4 years old?
Okay. Just quick side note. My buddy had a CRV, but it was pretty old.
Okay.
And rough and beaten up. I mean, it was like a clunker car. And he was a college student at the time. Someone stole his old Honda from the apartment complex where he lived.
Man, you got an old raggedy Honda and somebody steals that. That's really going to piss you off.
Well, yeah.
It's not even shiny.
This thing's like 16 years old. Yeah. It's a clunker. I mean, it's like, just gets me to work and back or whatever, to school and back. They end up finding the thing like a county over in Tennessee, and someone has spray painted it all with like hot pink spray paint.
Oh my gosh.
And it has like Hello Kitty seat covers and like the steering wheel cover.
Oh my
like someone's purposefully like purchased these things and put it in the car and then has like spray painted it all pink.
I gotta say, that's one of the happiest ways I could imagine finding my stolen car. Painted pink and with Hello Kitty stuff on it.
And then the car was stolen. It gets towed. And the towing lot or whatever didn't contact him, even though it's been reported missing. And then they were trying to charge him like thousands of dollars to get the car out of impound.
Right, like months
and
of
it was like
storage.
This whole thing. So he could get this like shitty, now hot pink Hello Kitty vehicle that someone has trashed.
That sucks so bad.
It was just some craziness at the time. So using dental records, law enforcement was able to identify the victim as 57-year-old James Jordan, father to Chicago Bulls superstar player Michael Jordan.
This was such a big deal when this happened back in the day.
Using the VIN number, they were able to track that the Lexus had been purchased at a Chicago dealership and was registered to the basketballer.
So the car is bought and registered in Michael Jordan's name.
Yes.
And his father drives the car.
Yes. And with the dental records, because Mr. Jordan had some extensive dental work and they had saved that jawbone, they were able to identify that he is the body found out in the gum swamp. Law enforcement officials thought it was peculiar that no one had filed a missing persons report on James Jordan. A timeline was established showing Jordan's movements before the murder. Now, he's been missing like 2 weeks.
That's a long time.
And no one reported him missing.
But like we discussed amongst ourselves, some people live their life very differently than you do, and they, and I can imagine once I really took a second and thought about it, Mr. Jordan is probably all over the place. They live in Charlotte, back and forth to Chicago with Michael.
Of a jet setter.
And Wilmington. They have roots in Wilmington. And so he has friends who know all over the place. His son's been very, very popular icon status for years. So it doesn't surprise me, honestly. These people don't probably move around like I do.
The Chicago Bulls won their third consecutive NBA championship title, beating the Phoenix Suns on June 20th of 1993. Michael Jordan was named the finals MVP for a third time. James Jordan was in attendance at the 6-game series. On July 22nd, James Jordan, who resided in Charlotte, North Carolina, had been in Wilmington, North Carolina, which was his former residence, to attend the funeral of a former co-worker. It wasn't a surprise to anyone who knew James that he would make an effort to attend the funeral. James Jordan was known as a loyal friend who often returned to his hometown and made extra attempts to keep in touch with the people he cared about.
Which says a lot about someone who is, his son's made a lot of money. They're well off now, but he really has those hometown roots. Where he grew up means something to him.
Yeah.
And I respect that.
I do too. On July 23rd, shortly after midnight, James Jordan departed Wilmington headed for Charlotte. He was scheduled to fly out to Chicago later that day for a golf tournament. As he traveled along U.S. Highway 74 to Charlotte, it is speculated that shortly after 2 a.m., James Jordan pulls off the road about 800 yards off of I-95 in Robeson County. And it was described as one of those pull-offs where truckers will sometimes park and sleep.
Okay.
Like off the side of the highway.
Not a full-on rest area, but like a big...
Like a dirt pull-off.
A pull-off spot. Yeah, okay.
Now, if you listen to our recent episode on the Lumberton 3, then you know Robeson County has a reputation for being the most deadly county in the state of North Carolina.
That says a lot.
I-95 had been nicknamed Cocaine Alley during the 1980s and 90s, as it was easy to transport drugs from Florida up the East Coast to cities like Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and New York City. Historically, Lumberton was not only plagued with crime, but racism as well. The Lumbee tribe in the area were often targeted by law enforcement. The area is poor, economically depressed, and drugs are rampant. African Americans in the area are also treated as second-class citizens by corrupt law enforcement. And this is going to play an important role in our story, so keep that in mind.
This is the part I was blown away with. I didn't know anything about how deep that part of the story goes. It's amazing.
So when James Jordan pulled off the highway to sleep on the side of the road, there was a Quality Inn only a few hundred yards away. Now, it has been said the motel was known for drugs, prostitution, and illegal card games.
Sounds like a nice, quiet place to get some rest.
People were curious why the father of the most famous athlete in the world, who had $30 million in endorsement deals, would choose to sleep in his car instead of just getting a room. For many, the story didn't make sense or add up. Even if Jordan simply wanted to take a nap, spending $60 to sleep for a few hours would have been chump change for him, right?
Yeah, but I mean, he's an older gentleman. He's set in his ways, and this may not be anything new for him. He may be perfectly comfortable, pulling off to the side of a convenience store parking lot or anywhere and catching a nap. It may be something he's done 100 times in his life.
Well, I get that, Dylan, but I think for most of us,
I think it's strange as well. I personally wouldn't be comfortable.
It's an odd choice.
Right.
Especially given...
He has all kinds of options and opportunities.
Well, given the history of the county, the crime there, and Mr. Jordan grew up in Wallace, North Carolina, which is not very far from Lumberton.
Little over an hour.
So he knows this area and that it may not be the safest place. So I think some of those factors weigh in when people say they don't quite understand why he thought taking a nap on the side of the road was okay.
Right.
Now, let's talk a little bit about James Jordan, Dylan. James was born on July 31st of 1936 in Wallace, North Carolina, to William and Rose Jordan. Wallace is located about 40 miles from Wilmington. It's a small country town near the coast in the southeastern part of the state. James was a great baseball player growing up, a sports fanatic who nearly went professional.
Okay, so he's an athletic guy as well.
Yeah, playing the stickball, Dylan.
Makes sense.
In 1957, after graduating from high school, James joined the Air Force. Before he departed for boot camp, James had met 15-year-old Dolores Peoples at Charity High School, funny enough, Dylan, at a basketball game in 1956. Dolores left soon after to attend the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Soon Dolores was homesick and returned to Wallace. She and James married. James was stationed in San Antonio, Texas. Then, when they returned back to North Carolina after his military enlistment, he worked at a textile mill in Wallace. Using the GI Bill, James attended school in New York City in 1963, bringing Dolores along with some of their children. They resided in Brooklyn, New York. They welcomed Ronnie Jr., Dolores, I'm assuming she's Dolores Jr., right? Larry, a son named Michael, who was born in New York in 1963, and a daughter named Rosalind. The Jordans decided Brooklyn wasn't really a good place to raise their kids, so they moved back to North Carolina, eventually settling in Wilmington, where James was employed by General Electric. He was considered a smart, skilled employee and eventually managed 3 departments.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he was described as being like top notch at whatever his job was. He was like really good at. He was very mechanical, good with electronics.
That's the good old days.
Take anything apart, put it back together.
That's the good old days when the American dream was still truly alive. You could just find a good blue collar job, and you could work, do your best, try really hard, and get promotions, and get some respect back from the company.
Dolores worked as a bank teller, and by all accounts, the Jordans were an upper middle class black family in Wilmington. It has been said that James and Dolores were excellent parents. They valued academics, education, and excellence. James Jordan taught his children about racism, but it was important to treat people the same. He figured the less black people factored in race as a determinant, that the less it would be factored against them.
I get what I catch his drift, I think.
So the Jordans' household was one of discipline and rules. Some of the rules included not to waste a natural God-given talent and to work hard. Dolores was considered a driving force in the home who played a huge role in child rearing alongside her husband. Dolores kept raising expectations. Like if her children met and exceeded a goal, she raised the bar higher, demanding that they keep striving to do better.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, she sounds like a tough cookie.
Well, honestly, given what Michael Jordan, their son, went on to do in his career and the way he carried himself, it makes sense that both his parents were like this. You can tell that he got his drive, his pursuit of excellence, and all that hard work. He got all that from his parents. He had great parents.
Yeah, they sound like excellent parents, Dylan. They were very hands-on. Dolores and James shared equal partnership when it came to raising the children. Again, they're both working parents, but they seem to have certain values that they instilled in their children.
Yeah.
Like working hard, and you want to get the best education possible, and you always want to do your best.
Yeah, and if you have talent or you excel at something, you should pursue that and make the most of it.
So growing up, son Michael was not mechanically inclined, which seemed to irk his dad. James was a handyman who could fix anything, like take stuff apart. He could build anything, always working with tools. And when Michael was young, his dad would sometimes tell him, get in the house with the women, because he didn't have the mechanical aptitude.
Right. Just put the flashlight down and go inside, son.
Yes. Now, Larry, Michael's older brother, was a great athlete growing up. He excelled as a baseball player. Michael and Larry developed a sibling rivalry, but at the same time, Michael deeply admired his brother and loved him. The two were always pushing each other to be better, especially when it came to sports.
See, I always wondered at the end of Michael's career, he broke off and went into Major League Baseball. And, you have some dual sport athletes out there. And it was always curious, why baseball? But it makes sense now that I know a little bit about his father's life and how his father loved baseball and almost went pro. So I'm sure.
And his brother Larry was a great baseball player.
Right. So
baseball was an important sport in their household. Both young men were standout athletes at Laney High School in Wilmington. James and Dolores were supportive parents who never missed a game. Michael has been called a late bloomer on the court. It wasn't until 10th grade that Michael made the varsity basketball team. He was a little disappointed as a freshman because he was put on a JV team.
Yeah, he's still a little bit scrawny back then, wasn't he?
And as a student, he was considered a good student. He made good grades, and he was a wonderful math student. Did really well in math classes.
I've never done well in math classes.
I know. Me either. So I was like, oh, cool. Good for him. He needs to be able to do all the stats.
Yeah.
Right?
Must be why I'm not an iconic, bigger than pop culture basketball star. Must be.
When colleges came calling, Michael was interested in attending UCLA, but it was UNC Chapel Hill that offered him a spot on the basketball team. The greatest basketball player in the history of the Carolina Tar Heels almost didn't play for that team.
A lot of people don't realize that.
His first year at Carolina, Michael was a defensive player, but the freshman soon clinched the title with winning at the 1982 NCAA championship game. Like, he made the shot that won the game.
The very last second shot.
Yes. It was
So
a
much-
3-pointer, right?
So much pressure for. I'm in amazement. You know, I like college sports, college sports for different reasons, but just the pressure and these young people operating at such a high level under that type of pressure. I'm amazed they can do it.
As a Tar Heel, Jordan was on fire. James and Dolores never missed a game. They were always supporting Michael, and they became part of the UNC family, with Coach Dean Smith considering the Jordans to be friends. And he really admired them and talked about how they were such great parents.
Yeah, that's one of those situations, you know, people will give lip service to stuff like that and say a bunch of fluffy stuff that sounds good. But I think you could tell that Coach Smith had like a closer relationship with the Jordan family maybe than he did other families of athletes.
James's advice to his young son had always been, quote, hard work and dedication would get you someplace. Michael Jordan was a third overall draft pick in 1984, joining the Chicago Bulls. He quickly emerged as a standout player, the star of the league. Crowds went crazy over his prolific scoring, and he became one of the NBA's best defensive players. His leaping ability, which he often demonstrated by performing slam dunks from the free throw line, earned him nicknames like Air Jordan and his airness.
Yeah, and he certainly wasn't the first person to dunk a basketball or anything like that. But I must say, as a young person growing up watching Michael, he took it to like maybe another level.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't quite Air Bud,
No.
the dog, but he was pretty good.
Well, nobody's better than Air Bud.
It's true.
But no, he had a style, or he just did things you hadn't seen before. Well, jumping from the free throw line and flying.
Well, the man looks like he's walking upstairs.
It looks
to
like
get
he had,
to the
yeah.
damn to slam dunk. I mean, come on.
We were watching
There's such grace.
Yeah, it looks like he flies
Yeah.
through the air. It's really amazing.
He can jump.
Even to this day, when I see the young Michael Jordan doing some of that stuff, I'm just like, wow. I couldn't imagine being able to do stuff like that.
No, but I mean, at the time, it really was like
Different.
Whoa! I mean, now we have LeBron.
Well, it's just the athletes have gotten bigger, stronger,
Yes.
faster techniques.
But I feel like Michael Jordan just sort of came out of the gate, and people were like,
What is happening?
Who is this?"
Well, everybody else, all these other really good athletes on the court are just standing around watching Michael do. I mean, that's why I always say to people, everybody in the house could know the ball's going to Michael at this last, 2 seconds left shot. And he could have 3 guys covering him. And somehow he would get open and fly up above everybody, and you make it. It's crazy.
Jordan helped the Bulls secure an NBA title in 1991 and then repeated for the following 2 years, so 3 times. Despite the fact that the Jordans had not filed a missing persons report for 2 weeks, that was not considered, I guess, unusual by law enforcement. Well, law enforcement did consider it to be unusual, but then when they started speaking with the family, they were like, oh, okay. Because it's like, as you had described, Dylan, like,
Yeah.
Dolores is running her son's foundation. They've got golf tournaments, different events.
Speaking engagements.
Exactly. So they're kind of all over the place, traveling around.
So just in this case alone, drove to Wilmington from Charlotte to attend a friend's funeral, and he's going to drive back to Charlotte and then fly to Chicago for a golf tournament. I mean, that's getting around. That's everybody heading in a separate direction.
Well, another reason why the Jordans didn't report him missing was because James Jordan was known to change his mind on a dime, like at the last minute.
So
it wasn't uncommon for James to cancel plans or just kind of go off on his own.
So he could be headed somewhere. I'm going to
And
meet
be
you
like, yeah, I'm not going
at
to do
so
that
and so.
now.
Yeah, and I'm going to go now. I'm going here.
Yes.
All right. I could imagine being like that.
So he kind of just did his own thing. When James didn't show up in Chicago on July 23rd for the golf tournament, Michael asked his private security team to look into it. Some have questioned why Dolores didn't report her husband missing. Dolores has commented that she was busy running Michael's foundation and that the couple were occupied with so many projects that they were not always together.
Well, I guess it's not abnormal for them to not see each other for 2 weeks.
However, I did want to mention that Michael's sister, Dolores, Do we want to call her Dolores 2 or Dolores Jr.?
Yeah, I will allow the women to make the choice on that.
All right, well, we'll call her Dolores Jr. Now, she's painted an entirely different picture of her family.
Really?
And she says that there was trouble in the marriage, that there had been trouble in the marriage for some years, that James and Dolores fought like cats and dogs.
Oh.
That sometimes their marriage was abusive, and that it was more like they kind of were leading separate lives.
Well, that happens in couples, and if that's the truth, then that's not abnormal, or that doesn't make any of them wrong either.
I should also mention that Dolores Jr. has written a kind of like what would you call that? Like an unauthorized biography or like tell-all about her family that has been very controversial.
And so, right quick, that's one of those situations where Dolores Jr. has put forth her version of growing up in the family dynamic. And she's the only one that has put that version forth, and everyone else in the family, including siblings, disagree with her?
Yes.
That's so tough because it's hard.
Well, her family has, because she wrote a book and it's a tell-all, and it describes her parents' marriage not being a good one. She claims her father sexually abused her.
Wow.
From like the age of, I think, 5 to 13. That when she told her mother, her mom said, don't tell anybody. And sort of like denied that it happened. And then was like, don't tell anybody. And silenced her.
Well, I mean, if that's true, that's terrible.
Now, her family has kind of pointed to the fact that Dolores has struggled with some mental illness. And she's been hospitalized more than once. And so they don't exactly, I mean, it almost seems like they want to say, you can't believe her story. But I think now when her book was published in the early 2000s, they kept kind of painting her as, well, she's a troubled person. Right. But I think now when we look at it through the modern lens, after the Me Too movement and all that, I feel like she wouldn't get an icy reception like she got back then.
Yeah, and see, I mean, is it possible that Dolores Jr. has had issues, mental problems, and
yeah, and she admits that, but she says yes, but everything I'm suffering from as an adult that I struggle with is directly related to the things that happened to me as a child when I was abused.
Right, and she could, and that's a great point. That's a great point, and she could be saying things that aren't true for whatever reason we don't understand. That's possible, but it seems to me much more likely that someone wouldn't put forth these types of allegations because it's hard. It's hard on them, the victim, if this did happen, to talk about these types of things, let alone in the public. And it seems far less likely that they would say these things if they're not true. That's just my take on it.
Right. And like I said, I don't want to go too much into it. I'm not trying to like tarnish anybody.
I'm not either. There's no evidence. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the book is out there. People can read it if they want to. It's easy to find. But I did think it was maybe an important mention just because people were like, why would you wait 2 weeks? But we have these explanations for that.
No, and anytime you have a different version of a family and something, let alone from somebody who lived it with the family, I think it's always interesting and a good point to bring that up and just show that maybe everything isn't as rosy as it seems.
News of James Jordan's murder spread quickly as investigators pieced together a timeline, kind of into the days and weeks leading up to the murder. Rumors began swirling. So, Dylan, Michael Jordan had been investigated by the IRS after a check written to a man named James Slim Buhler surfaced. The check was written for $57,000.
Wow.
Buhler was a known drug dealer, and when the Chicago Times learned of this money transfer from basketball player Michael Jordan to this convicted drug dealer,
Ruh-roh.
they published a story on it.
And that doesn't surprise me, does it you? I'm just wondering how the $57,000 check made it to the public. Because if Mr. Drug Dealer guy with 50, and it's a real check in his name, it's coming from a validated source that can be proven, someone who actually has that type of money, it seems like it would stay quiet and just between you and your bank. unless someone leaked it.
Well, again, the IRS is looking into this.
Oh, so they
because
went
it's a
over his
huge-
I see.
I mean, I just said that
No, I see.
if you were listening, but you weren't.
I was listening.
Okay. So Jordan admitted that this caused a big scandal, by the way. Michael Jordan admitted that the money was to pay off a gambling debt. Jordan's gambling habit became public knowledge, even prompting a private investigation or like an internal investigation by the NBA.
Right.
This is around 92, 93. Jordan was known to gamble at casinos between playoff games, like taking a jaunt to Atlantic City in 1993 right before the finals games against the Knicks. Some sports columnists speculated there were ties between the murder of James Jordan and Michael's gambling habits. But Jordan released a statement condemning this theory.
Yeah, and he was gambling at a very high level. Big chunks of money.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And it doesn't surprise me once you learn that a player like Michael who handles the ball, he's a big star on his team, he has a lot of control, if you will. If you find out he likes to gamble, if you will, quote unquote, you're going to take a hard look at that and make sure he's not fixing games. Because if he's hooked up with
He's
somebody.
not the Pete Rose of basketball.
Yeah, or he's not the, what was the Goodfellas guy? Henry Hill. Henry Hill was caught up in a point shaving scheme with Boston College. So, yeah, they have to take a hard look at that to make sure he's not cheating and, making big money off or paying off gambling debts by fixing games.
As you can imagine, the gambling, it was a bit scandalous.
It's not a good look. Huh.
2 months after James Jordan's death, Michael announced he was retiring, one of the most astonishing announcements in sports. At a news conference, Michael Jordan said his father suggested he retire after he won his first championship with the Bulls back in 1991. But Jordan then said his father's death was not the reason that he was leaving the NBA.
So he's kind of framing it like he was already thinking about it anyway. And given all this other stuff going on with his family, why not now is the perfect time?
Right. And he said, quote, "I have nothing more to prove in basketball. I have no more challenges that I felt I could get motivated for. It doesn't have anything to do with my father's passing or media pressure or anything other than I had achieved everything in basketball that I could." Jordan would go on to try his hand at baseball, playing for the Birmingham Barons, a minor league team that is affiliated with the Chicago White Sox, before returning to the NBA for the 1994-95 season. He retired again in 1998 and 2003, winning 3 more championship titles for the Chicago Bulls.
So that's how iconic Michael, he really was at the top of the game. I don't think there ever been anyone quite like him. He's already won 3. So if you get one title, a Super Bowl, championship in basketball, whatever, it's a big deal. He's already gotten 3 MVP of the finals, and then he retires, kicks around, and ends up playing a little bit of pro baseball. He made it on the diamond with the pro baseballs, the Sox, and then comes back out of retirement and scoops up another 3 championships.
He's just
such
come
on.
an amazing player.
I could not imagine doing anything at that level.
Talent, I know, right? Well, again, I think very few of us are given those kinds of gifts
Well, I gotta
or
say,
have those natural abilities.
What Michael Jordan was to basketball, not really baseball, but basketball, I am to sitting and looking.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are the real MVP.
Well, I've not been nationally recognized yet, but I feel like if there's ever a structured playoff for sitting and looking, I feel like we're going to be champions.
I'm going to give you a most improved award.
An MIP?
Yes.
Okay.
Investigators began looking at the evidence available in the murder, focusing on the stripped Lexus. And I know I'm skipping around a little bit, but it'll all make sense in the end, I promise. The car had a cellular phone, a car phone. Remember those, Dylan?
Yeah, or the sometimes known as bag phones, but I think this was actually mounted in the car.
It was actually mounted in the car.
Right.
It was a car phone. So law enforcement was interested in seeing the call records. James Jordan's phone showed like Chicago numbers, many repeats, kind of all over the country, right?
Not North Carolina, though. It was like Chicago, Cleveland.
I mean, there were a few calls in like Wilmington and Charlotte. But on the morning of July 23rd, around 7:05 a.m., a bunch of calls were placed to Lumberton, Pembroke, and the surrounding area.
In the Roberson area.
Yeah. A 2-minute phone call was placed to a sex line from the car's phone. A series of phone calls were made to others, including a call at 10:36 a.m. to a man named Hubert Larry Deese, who happened to be a convicted drug dealer and was the illegitimate son of Robeson County Sheriff Hubert Stone.
Wow, what's the odds of that?
You just wait.
This gets really crazy
It goes
fast.
deep, Dylan. So deep.
So who okay, I got to say right quick, who's in like a stolen car or whatever? You see there's a phone, which was still a novel thing back then.
Well, yeah, you have to remember in 1993, cell phones were not common. They were very expensive. And if you had a cell phone or you had a car phone, you were doing the damn thing.
Yeah. I remember in Saved by the Bell, Zach with his cell phone, and it was like big as a microwave.
Yes, baby.
And had a 3-foot antenna on it. Or you had the one mounted in a car, which was typically for well-to-do people or business people. But then you just like, let me call a sex line right quick. I mean, who does that?
Well, I'll tell you who does that, Dylan. So as you see, like beginning in the early morning hours, these calls were placed to local numbers all around Lumberton, Pembroke, as I mentioned, Robeson County. And the calls would lead police to 2 suspects. Daniel Andre Green and Larry Demery were unlikely friends. Daniel Green was born to a single mother in Lumberton. His father was incarcerated, and Daniel was raised primarily by his great-grandmother. As a boy, he moved to Philadelphia, and in Philadelphia, life was hard for Green. He lived in concentrated poverty, surrounded by violence. Green had a stutter, which often led to bullying, and due to his southern drawl, it made classroom time difficult.
Wow, that's so he's getting made fun of for his accent. He stutters, and he's also like in a new environment and doesn't have any friends.
People called him the southern nerd.
Okay.
So by the time he was 13, Green witnesses his best friend, another 13-year-old boy, be shot and killed by police.
Wow.
Shortly after that, his uncle was murdered. It was around that time that Green began carrying a gun for safety. Many young people who grow up in those types of environments think, I'm not going to make it to adulthood anyway.
And that's really sad for them to have that outlook on life.
Well, you know, when you're raised, I guess, in the midst of violence like this, you just assume everyone you know's been murdered or has been a victim of violent crime. I mean, you think, okay, well, my days are numbered too. I mean, it's really sad.
Well, yeah, I
mentality.
Not one single time in my life was a friend of mine or a cousin or a family member gunned down by violent crime.
I think that's so far removed from most of our experiences. But when you live in like inner cities.
Yeah. But if you're 18 years old and you know 9 people who have been, directly knew 9 people that's been killed by violent crime, gun violence, it's hard to say how you would react or what type of mentality you would gain from living somewhere like that. It's easy for us to say.
It's like a kill or be killed kind of survival of the fittest mentality.
Well, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback it from my point of view, out in the country, not around that type of violence growing up. And but there's I'm sure it would affect you. It would affect you a lot if you grew up in an environment like that.
So when Daniel Green moved back to Robeson County, he was like, again, it was a bit of a culture shock, right? Because he's lived in Philadelphia. Now he's back in this small kind of rural area, but it's not without problems, Dylan. So Daniel is Black. And in Robeson County, especially in the 1980s, racism was a daily struggle. People stayed within their own groups and usually didn't befriend outside their race. However, Daniel Green, a Black boy, made fast friends with a Lumbee boy named Larry Demery. Larry Demery was one of the few kids who never made fun of Daniel for his stutter or speech issues. Green was also bullied by other guys at school because he was handsome and the girls liked him.
Yeah, that always makes the ugly bullies mad.
It did. And by high school, Daniel Green was considered to be a smart kid, but was placed in what was called like a non-academic track. Therefore, he wasn't being challenged and often succumbed to the bullying. and just wasn't challenged. So he gets bored at school and then, finds himself getting into trouble for doing like little piddly things.
So it's almost like he's like in some type of remedial classes or something to that effect.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the non-academic track was more like for kids who they felt like maybe were in danger of not graduating, and they're not really preparing you for it's not like college preparatory classes. It's more like we're just giving you a degree to get into the workforce or, that kind of thing.
Right. It's more hands-on, maybe, like shop classes or vocations, things like that.
And he often engaged in fights, which led to suspensions and other troubles. When Daniel Green was 16, he was jumped by 3 guys, and they were older guys. After being beaten up, he managed to get away, yet the 3 boys followed him. During the second attack, because they jump him again, Green grabs an axe, which was sitting on a friend's porch, and he hits one of the bullies with the blunt end of the axe.
And so this is the same guys who've already beaten him severely already.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's 3-on-1. They beat the shit out of him. He manages to get away. They find him again, attack him a second time. This time he grabs an axe.
Oh, all in one event.
Yeah, this was just like a matter of, like minutes.
Okay.
They he runs, they track him down.
I would be scared for my life in a situation like that.
Well, he was charged with assault and given a public defender, even though this is a clear case of self-defense. He was 16 at the time, so the public defender told him to just go ahead and plead guilty because it was a first offense and he'd probably only get like probation for the crime. Gotta love those public defenders.
Oh, God, I'd be so nervous if I had a public defender on something worse than like a traffic offense. And no offense to a public defender, they're just not seasoned, they're not as experienced.
Well, no, they are. They just don't. They're not really being paid for their time, and they don't really give a shit. Let's call it what it is, Dylan.
Oh, so they're oh, yeah, I forget. The regular lawyers are in a rotation of a defend. Oh, I see. Yes, you're right. You're right.
Oh, they got the skills.
They got the skills,
but they're just not that invested because they're not getting the big bucks.
Now I know how this works. You get a public defender, you may have some kind of even a serious charge.
You're lucky if they talk to you like 2 minutes before court starts.
Yeah, and that'll be the first time you ever saw them.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have experience with. I'm not in trouble all the time or anything.
Well, no, me neither. But
I'm just saying, like,
right.
It's not.
It's not like going out and paying a lawyer to be on your side.
Right.
Okay.
Yet a judge thought otherwise. That, about giving Green this light sentence, and actually gave him 6 years in prison. So Daniel Green went to an adult prison at age 16.
So here you have a 16-year-old who's gotten, had this happen. And
his public defender didn't try to make the point that this was self-defense, that he had been beaten and attacked twice by a group. Or
approach the DA or prosecutor and say, hey, it's his first offense. This is what happened. Can we get a plea? He just gets first offense, 6 years off the rip. That seems kind of stiff to me.
It does. He spends 2 years behind bars, and while he was away, Larry Demery was the only person who kept in contact with Green. Demery wrote him letters, visited him, and Green felt a sense of loyalty to Larry Demery. 2 years later, Green's sentence is overturned, and he's released.
Which, if from the sounds of all that information, I agree with that.
Back in Robeson County, Larry Demery greets his old friend with open arms. Daniel Green finds acceptance among Larry and his group of friends, yet Larry Demery was trouble. Investigators, so we're going to get back into our story, but I just want to give you a little bit of background. Again, like I said, we're going to skip around some, but I promise in the end, at least in my head, it made sense.
It'll make sense
when I wrote it.
We trust you.
Okay. So investigators perform forensic testing on the Lexus. Fingerprint tests along with a luminol test is performed, though they cannot find any traces of blood inside the car. 4 young men, Kenneth Ferrier, Terrellus Teasley, Gary Ferrier, and Jovan Carter, all from Fayetteville, North Carolina. They're arrested, and they admit they had participated in stripping the stolen Lexus. According to the men, Daniel Green and Larry Demery had brought the car to them.
Wow. So they're in possession. They say, yes, we were in the car. We took it out, beat it up, stole the parts and wheels off of it.
Yes.
But we didn't someone else gave us the car.
Yes.
Okay.
Daniel's brother, David, who was stationed at Fort Bragg and was in the Army, would tell investigators that Daniel had brought the car to his rented mobile home in Fayetteville, asking if he would help get rid of it. And David ordered his brother to leave.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He was like, I don't want to have a damn thing to do with this. Get this. I don't know what this is. What car this is. Stolen. I don't know, but get it out of here.
So he shows up in this shiny sports model Lexus. It's a really nice car for back then, especially. And yeah, that's the right call as far as the brother's making. Get this the hell out of here. I don't want any part of it.
At a rented mobile home where Green and Demery lived, law enforcement officials made a few interesting discoveries when they got a search warrant. James Jordan's watch, an NCAA championship ring, which was given to him by Michael Jordan, and a .38 caliber pistol is recovered at this mobile home where they live.
Yeah, see, that's something that's very specific. A college basketball championship ring that Michael won when he was with with Michael's name on it. You know what I mean?
Well, and I believe it's maybe like an NBA watch. It's some very specific watch as well.
Right. So it's something that there's no doubt about where it came from.
A VHS tape is also recovered. There's a collection of VHS that are all labeled, but this one tape.
Oh, wow.
So out of curiosity, the investigators pick it up, pop it in the VCR, Dylan, and guess what?
It's not porn, is it?
Unfortunately, it's not. No.
Good.
No, it's a video of Daniel Green wearing the stolen jewelry, the NBA ring, the NBA watch, like these items that belong to James Jordan, and he's dancing and rapping. It's essentially a rap video.
Oh my god.
Where he's wearing the stuff and dancing and like rapping.
Okay.
And someone has filmed him doing this.
With a VHS camcorder.
The old school 800-pound camcorder.
Yeah.
That would probably cost an arm and a leg.
But yeah, it was still a big
At the
deal.
time.
People
Yeah.
were super excited to
for
get
real, bud.
recorded, you know?
Oh, yeah. Now, upon arrest, Daniel Green tells investigators he knew nothing about the murder and had nothing to do with the car's disposal. He doesn't know anything.
Okay.
Green had always trusted Larry Demery and had his back, so he assumed that his friend would take care of him. Daniel Green had no idea that his friend would throw him under the bus.
Shit. You know, that's what happens when big things happen and you get tied up in a mess with friends. The rats start swimming away from the ship.
Well, it doesn't take long for Larry Demery to turn on his friend, and Larry Demery quickly makes a deal with prosecutors. However, Daniel Green from the beginning proclaimed his innocence in James Jordan's murder. At the time of the murder, Daniel Green said he was at a cookout with his mother, sister, some friends, and a girlfriend named Bobby Jo Murillo.
Wow, that seems like a solid alibi.
Multiple witnesses corroborate his story and agree that he was at the cookout between July 22nd and July 23rd. And according to, the late at night into the early morning hours.
Right. All evening into the next day.
According to Green, Larry Demery called him to the murder scene and asked him to dispose of the body and car. It was Larry Demery who suggested they dump the body by the P Bridge, as it was 1 mile away from Crestline Mobile Homes, where Larry Demery had worked with a known drug dealer, Hubert Deese.
So this is lining up with the investigators' their first impressions of the scene. This has to be a local because of where the body was located, and indeed, it's people that know the area very well.
Yep, because Larry worked at Crestline Mobile Homes. It is not far away. And then if you recall, he made some phone calls from that car phone, and one of them was to Hubert Deese, the illegitimate son of the local sheriff.
The sheriff's
the
bastard.
Robeson County Sheriff.
Right.
Yeah. And it was only a mile away from Deese's home, like where the body was dumped. If you recall, Dylan, like I said, someone placed a call to Deese from the car phone. He's the illegitimate son of the sheriff. It's all sort of starting to kind of come together.
Yeah, it is.
Now let's discuss Sheriff Hubert Stone, because this is where things kind of take a bit of a turn, but we have to talk about this.
I gotta say, poor Mr. Jordan, the victim. I mean, I can't imagine what he went through before he was killed. But for his body to end up in Robeson County was probably one of the worst places for his body to be found. Does that make sense? As far as being investigated and all that properly.
Okay. Are you done talking now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So elected in 1978, Sheriff Stone restructured the Robeson County Sheriff's Office. During his time in office, Robeson County became the epicenter of drug trafficking. Sheriff Stone and a district attorney named Joe Freeman Britt worked to prosecute narcotics related offenses. Now, this guy Britt, he's known as the deadliest prosecutor in the United States, earning a title in the Guinness Book of World Records.
What? With his conviction rate?
Having won 47 death row convictions while in office.
Holy cow.
And I bet you can guess what color the majority of those death row convictions. I bet you can guess the race of those people.
They were purple. Flying purple people eaters.
Mm-hmm. So Sheriff Hubert Stone's tenure was marred by allegations of corruption. He testified on behalf of a cocaine dealer in 1985 and then wrote a letter asking the feds to drop charges against a marijuana dealer that he happened to be friends with.
This seems like unusual behavior for a sheriff.
It is alleged that Stone had a protection racket for every ounce of cocaine sold in the county. And this is according to a deputy who testified in a federal trial.
Wow.
As racial tensions brewed, Stone's office seemed to target Black and Native people, specifically.
So yeah, this county has a lot of its own problems going on, and it sounds like it's just like in the area, crime's getting worse, the drug trafficking is getting worse, and I'm sure the locals, it feels like nobody's doing anything about it.
Oh, yeah, we got to talk about, I mean, it's crazy, Dylan. So on November 1st of 1986, Stone's, I guess, legitimate son, Kevin Stone, also a deputy, shoots and kills an unarmed Lumbee man named Jimmy Earl Cummings. 3 days later, Sheriff Stone was reelected to his post. A coroner's inquest ruled the shooting as accidental and in self-defense.
Wow.
This unarmed man.
How does that work?
Robeson County's newspaper, the Robesian, criticized the sheriff's office. Kevin Stone had been incredibly inexperienced and young, yet his father promoted him as head of the narcotics division. Members of the community were outspoken and demanded an external investigation of the sheriff's department. 2 Tuscarora men took hostages in February of 1988 in an attempt to bring attention to the death of a Black man in the Robeson County Jail and the allegations of corruption within the sheriff's department, mainly the office's involvement in cocaine trafficking. So these 2 men take over the Robesian, the newspaper, and hold people hostage.
That's like something you would see in a movie.
Absolutely. After state officials agreed to launch an investigation, the men surrendered. So part of their demands is simply, we just want the state to look into this. We want an internal, some kind of investigation.
Right. Some objective third party that's far removed from the local influence. They didn't want money. They didn't want a helicopter to get away to a private island or anything like that. They simply wanted someone to investigate and take a hard look at what's happening there in the county.
Exactly, Dylan.
But you shouldn't hold people at gunpoint to get that done. But some would argue that's a desperate measure by people who feel like they're not being heard or have no other recourse.
They have no place to turn.
Wow, damn. I all of a sudden got very, very deep.
Now you're an activist.
Now we're here at NPR. We're back with Mountain Murders and Heather.
Dylan, there was also another gentleman, and I think his name was Zabatsky or Zabatowski. I didn't write it down. That was my mistake.
It was something like Sabatowski or something like that.
I believe so. So he is a guy living in Robeson County. I guess he has some ties to the drug world. And he makes a comment that he wants to take out Kevin Stone,
Oh, wow.
the deputy, because he shot Jimmy Earl Cummings.
Oh, so someone's basically threatening the sheriff's son
Yes.
after the sheriff's son was involved in an officer's shooting.
Next thing you know, a deputy named Mac Locklear shoots the Zabeski or Zabatowski, whatever his name is. I cannot remember.
Who made a public threat against the deputy.
And that was also just brushed under the carpet.
That seems like a big coincidence.
There's a lot of corruption in this county.
Not saying that Mr. Zaba, whatever his name is, should be threatening the deputy. You know,
So that's another murder that's questionable that possibly involves the sheriff. Let's move along. So then in 1988, a Lumbee attorney and an activist named Julian Pierce is murdered. Pierce, a Georgetown graduate, campaigned for the new Superior Court judgeship and was going up against Stone's friend, the former DA, Joe Freeman Britt, the deadliest prosecutor in America.
Oh, okay.
Right? Pierce made a campaign promise to investigate allegations of corruption against Hubert Stone, especially that Stone was engaged in a protection racket with drug dealers. Hubert Stone tried convincing Pierce to drop out of the judge race.
Yeah, you know, okay, it doesn't surprise me, but if you had nothing to hide, why would you care? Okay, investigate me. That's fine. Go ahead.
But Pierce refused to quit. Instead, he ramped up the campaign. Throughout February and March of 1988, it is alleged that Hubert Stone used bribery and blackmail tactics to coerce Pierce to quit the race.
So he's doing everything in his power.
Drop out of,
to make Pierce stop.
Drop out of the election.
Shut up. Get out of the way.
Pierce's friends and campaign workers feared for his safety and requested that he start carrying a weapon for protection. But Pierce was kind of like, I'm not scared.
Right.
Right? At a political dinner on March 24th of 1988, Hubert Stone confronted Pierce again about running for office. Stone told him, quote, "I know you and Joe are working on me. I'm not going to hurt you." It's kind of an odd thing to say, right?
Yeah, it is.
So Pierce was found murdered in his house on March 26th, just 2 days after this conversation.
Yet another big coincidence, huh?
Yes. The 42-year-old was found in a pool of blood in the kitchen of his home. He had been shot twice, gunshot blasts ripped through his chest and abdomen, and a third shot was fired behind the ear. It was so vicious that the ear, brain, and bone fragments were recovered in the next room.
So it sounds to me like someone wanted to make sure that he died.
Absolutely. Small bloody footprints were found across the kitchen floor to the back door and on some of the carpet inside the house. But the shoe prints appeared to be from a woman's shoe, and they were very small footprints, which was baffling, right? Police, including Sheriff Hubert Stone, appeared at the house to investigate the murder. Over 200 Lumbee gathered at Pierce's house demanding information about what had happened. Hubert Stone announced that an arrest had been made, and this is a few days later, a man named Johnny Goins. And he said that Goins had killed Pierce with the help of a man named Sandy Chavis. Now, according to Hubert Stone, Goins had a motive, allegedly. Pierce's girlfriend had warned Goins to stay away from her 16-year-old daughter.
That will make most people mad.
And he's a grown man, so he needs to get on somewhere. Again, is this a convenient story? I mean, it would make sense, maybe, that this fella got mad when he was told to move along.
Right.
All right. So Goins' blood and fingerprints were found inside Pierce's home. Goins was found dead of an apparent suicide, a shotgun wound to the head. He was also tucked in a closet at his father's house when law enforcement showed up to arrest him.
Wait, so he shot himself in the head with a shotgun, then tucked himself in the closet? And it's suicide?
Well, I guess he went in the closet to shoot himself is the idea here.
Okay. Just another strange circumstance, a death surrounded by strange circumstance.
So then Sandy Chavis was arrested and charged with the murder. When Hubert Stone told some people, I guess this crowd, people demanding to know answers, that they had very little to go on, like, we're begging you to come forward with information so we'll know who did this, whatever. A member of the crowd shouted, "You're crooked as hell."
Oh, wow.
People, especially the Lumbee activists, were scared. If a prominent attorney like Pierce could be killed, then no one was safe.
Well, and you had nearly 200 people show up at the scene, basically. So that shows what Pierce meant to the community. He had a lot of supporters and a lot of people who were invested in this whole situation.
Maurice Geiger, who operates a nonprofit which monitored Robeson County court records, has stated that 1,000 innocent people have been convicted in Robeson County courts, an overwhelming majority being Black and Native American. Pierce's briefcase, which was said to contain documents with evidence against the county government, went missing and has never been recovered.
See, that's what I'm saying. Why do people have to take hostages to, ask for help and make someone, I'm saying in the other instance, they felt they had no one was hearing them. All they wanted was a third party or the government to investigate. There's so much shit. Even if someone has no idea about Robeson County, reads all this, as you tell us this story, I don't understand how the SBI or the state, agencies did not come in and do some kind of a thorough investigation of what's happening here in Robeson County, because these are way too many coincidences, way too many people dying that's convenient for the sheriff or the other people involved.
The sheriff's department was unable to find dispatch tapes from the night Pierce was killed. Conveniently, those calls just disappeared.
This is too many conveniences, man.
And Goins' autopsy report mentioned a suicide note was found, but the sheriff's department was never able to produce it. A bloody footprint inside Pierce's home did not belong to Chavis or Goins. Again, it was like the size of a woman's foot, it's a very small footprint. Also, the state medical examiner and investigators disagreed on whether Goins had shot himself through the mouth or the side of the head. There was no gunpowder residue found on Goins' hands.
How do you shoot? I don't even know how you do it in the side of the head with a shotgun. I mean, this is tricky.
Again, it doesn't really make sense, Dylan. A photo of the death scene showed a shotgun sitting in Goins' lap with its breech open. Stone argued the breech was closed when Goins was discovered, but this photo proves otherwise.
So you're saying someone tampered with it before they took pictures? That's not very professional.
What he seems to be indicating. And Chavis, the other man that was arrested and charged, he ended up entering an Alford plea in 1990 because a key witness refused to testify in the case.
So yeah, he's basically admitting guilt, even though he's claiming to be innocent, but he's saying that he feels like there's enough evidence for a jury to convict. That would be your Alford plea, but you're still proclaiming innocence.
Later, Chavis will say he saw a sheriff's patrol car along with a red pickup truck belonging to a man named Dexter Earl Locklear in front of Pierce's house around the time of the murder. A witness reported that a deputy was hanging out in a gas station 5 hours before Pierce's body was found, telling people that the politician was dead.
5 hours before his body was found?
Yeah. A 17-year-old named Jimmy Allen overheard this conversation, and nobody in town knew that Pierce was dead, and his body won't be discovered for hours.
That does not add up.
More witnesses claim to have seen the sheriff's patrol and the red pickup at Pierce's house on the night that he is believed to have been killed. A woman who was camping in the woods behind Pierce's home said she saw two men dressed like hunters with shotguns walk past her campsite towards Julian Pierce's house. About 15 minutes later, she heard shots ring out.
Wow. That could be a huge witness.
Someone else claimed to see the red pickup truck at Pierce's house and that there was another blue pickup truck parked in a wooden area with a view of Pierce's property, as if it was parked watching his house.
Wow. See, these are some
And by the
really-
way, none of these vehicles belong to Goins or Chavez,
Right.
the two accused.
So if there's any truth to any of these are very, very strong leads for investigators to look into.
Hubert Stone, Sheriff Stone, who's had this very questionable career, right? He's directly involved in James Jordan's murder investigation and soon theorizes that Daniel Green and Larry Demery planned to rob Jordan but decided to kill him instead. Yet many residents were skeptical of his theory. Connie Brayboy, a news editor, said the place where Jordan was murdered was a known drug spot. She said, quote, James Jordan was either part of what goes on in this county or he runned up on something that in that particular location that was not meant to see and live.
So this is a known area. Locals all around would know about this type of an area. And it's very unlikely that most people, regular citizens, unless, like she said, you're involved in the drug trade or trying to get into some trouble, you would never, ever stop or be in this area.
You're not going to pull off on the side of the road and take a nap.
If you're looking to pull off on the side of the road, this is going to be one place you drive past, and you don't do it.
So Larry Demery, he takes a plea deal, and he agrees to testify against Daniel Green. It was the first time in North Carolina that cell phone records would be used as evidence in a murder case. Using cell phone tower pings and calls made from the Lexus, law enforcement was able to make the connection between Demery and Green. Green testified that he had no idea the Lexus belonged to James Jordan initially. He assumed it was the car of a local drug dealer. And of course, there was the damning rap video, which featured Green wearing the dead man's stolen jewelry.
That's pretty hard evidence right there.
Yet Green's defense failed to mention that Larry Demery also resided in the mobile home and had access to this jewelry as well.
Okay, so if you find the jewelry there where Daniel Green lives, it just as well could have been Daniel's or it could have been Larry's.
Yes.
Okay.
The Jordan family didn't want Michael's celebrity status to taint the trial process, so they kept their distance and really didn't comment on the trial at all. Larry Jordan attended court on behalf of the family to testify to the ownership of the jewelry items. He made only a brief statement indicating that the family felt it wasn't the right time to comment on the case. The defense failed to explore Green's alibi and didn't call any witnesses despite having many who had seen Daniel Green at the cookout. Including his girlfriend, Bobby Jo Murillo. She's never called to the stand.
Yeah, you got his girlfriend, family.
His mom, his sister, a bunch of other people.
And friends. I mean, this isn't one person. This isn't, a lot of times when the spouse is the alibi, we're at home alone watching TV or whatever, I sometimes wonder because, many times that turns out they lied for their, loved one if they're trying to cover something up. But when you have a whole crowd of different people, that's strong evidence. That's a really solid alibi. And I can imagine the defense not following that or trying to bring that into the court.
So they bring in this elderly man. He's in his 70s, and his last name is Cluess.
This guy's a trip.
Okay. So this gentleman, Mr. Cluess, again, he's like in his 70s. He takes the stand to testify that he had been robbed at gunpoint at his store. He owned like a little convenience store by Daniel Green 8 days before James Jordan's murder. According to Cluess, Green shot him and also took his gun.
Wow.
Larry Demery was involved in this Cluess robbery as well. Larry Demery had also robbed an elderly woman using a cinder block to beat her.
That's brutal.
While at south of the border in South Carolina, a lot of people know that roadside attraction, Larry Demery had wanted to rob someone. And he told Daniel Green that the first people he saw coming out of the family inn would be for the taking. Larry Demery was responsible for several violent robberies, and almost everyone said that he was the leader of these robberies. Daniel Green was always in the background, like almost a follower to Larry Demery.
So it's one of those situations you take Larry Demery out of the equation, and then maybe these robberies aren't happening.
Yes. Yet the prosecution paints Daniel Green as the ringleader. Others believe Daniel Green was not at the Clueless robbery. And later, the elderly witness will say, quote, "I can't swear it was him," meaning Daniel Green, "because so many black people look alike." So he's an unreliable witness, and obviously there's some racial shit going on with this old man.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I'm like, he's in his 70s. And I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but
right. Some people will say that very thing. Well, in their day things were different. And you also have a man who is in his 70s. You know, he's older, comes with we all have cognitive decline as we get older.
Right.
And he's remembering events from nearly 3 years ago. And he's recounting that as well when the trial finally made it into court. And I think a lot of our listeners know our problems or our hesitations about eyewitness accounts.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's a black defendant and the eyewitnesses are white. And guess what? They were wrong. But they sat there on the stand and swore on the Bible that was the person that did whatever crime.
Right. So he's testifying that it could have been Daniel Green, that he thinks it's Daniel Green. But then he says, I don't know.
Which is an honest answer. I will give him that.
So then here we have these robberies that many people are testifying at trial. And they're each saying Larry Demery was a known burglar and, robber. And that he always kind of brought this dude along kind of just for the ride.
Right. If Daniel Green got involved, it's because Larry got him involved.
So in a jury's mind, I mean, after listening to Clueless and all, it would be hard to say that absolutely for certain that this was Daniel Green who robbed you and not someone else, because Larry Demery had like a whole other group of friends that he kind of did some of these violent crimes with.
Okay.
Right? The prosecution's theory is that James Jordan fell asleep in the Lexus, pulled over, side of the road, dirt pull off the highway, and that he went to sleep with the window down.
Oh, so it's kind of hot and humid. He's got the window cracked and he's going to catch a nap.
It sounds like the window was all the way down.
Oh.
Like according to what the prosecution is theorizing. That he's just sleeping with the window down. The most dangerous county in the state.
Me personally, I could never do that, and I would never be able to go to sleep. I would be so freaked out and nervous.
They believe he was shot at close range in the chest. And this is also according to what Larry Demery said. Yet there was no blood inside the car, Dylan. Green and Demery supposedly moved Jordan after they shot him to the passenger seat. But there was no blood found in the car.
Not a drop.
Not a drop. The .38 caliber gun that they found at their trailer was analyzed by the SBI crime lab. Yet the ballistic tests were inconclusive, and it couldn't be proven the .38 was the murder weapon. Also, there was a tiny spot found on the passenger seat that was not visible to the human eye. And initially, it was believed to be a blood spot. However, that was not conclusively proven either.
So basically, it's a microscopic spot.
Yes.
I wonder how they even found that.
Just like luminol.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like you can't even, I mean, not to even, you can see the head of a pin, which is pretty small. So once you get smaller than that, that's a very...
Yeah, it couldn't be seen.
That's crazy.
Under North Carolina law, if you're with another person committing a felony and someone is killed, you're equally culpable. In the end, it doesn't matter who pulled the trigger. If they were both at the crime scene when Jordan died, then it didn't matter.
Right, and a lot of states have some version of that law.
But get this, Dylan.
Aggravated homicide and things like that.
The defense, Daniel Green's attorneys, never conducted its own bullet trajectory tests or blood analysis. Sheriff Hubert Stone was able to get the prosecution to exclude evidence from the phone calls, specifically the information that Hubert Deese, Stone's illegitimate son, was a person who Demery had contacted via the car phone.
Now, hold on a second. How is he allowed to have this type of persuasion over evidence, important evidence, in a murder trial?
Because he's butt buddies with that Joe
Yeah, I know.
Freeman Britt or whatever that's the prosecutor that was running for judge.
I know, but that's wholly inappropriate, in my opinion. I think anyone would agree with that.
Well, for whatever reason, Hubert Stone had sway over everybody, and what he wanted, he got, bud.
Well, and I'm saying if he's blackmailing or is a part of some kind of drug racket or a drug market, that would explain why he holds such big sway over
So
people.
Hubert Stone was able to sever any ties to the case, especially that his son might have some kind of involvement. And there have been people out there who have a theory that Hubert Deese was involved. And that Larry Demery and this guy maybe did this and then brought Daniel Green in later, and that Deese maybe helped them with the body disposal.
Well, at the very least, we know for a fact that someone from Mr. Jordan's Lexus called him on the car phone.
Yeah. But
So
the
we-
sheriff was able to get this, I guess, just left out at trial. They didn't bring this up at trial at all.
That just does not
That
seem...
evidence just went out the window, Dylan.
It's yet another convenient moment for Robertson County Sheriff's Department.
Daniel Green was given a life sentence. So in recent years, the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence has taken on Green's case. His attorney, Chris Muma, had field tests conducted based on Larry Demery's testimony of how the robbery and murder went down on July 23rd of 1993. Using his words, they recreated the scene. And guess what, Dylan?
What?
The bullet trajectory doesn't work as described. The trajectory shows the murder happened in a completely different way than what was stated at trial.
Okay.
During autopsy, Dr. Sexton noted there was evidence of a bullet wound in James Jordan's chest, but that there was no matching, like a corresponding bullet hole in the shirt he was wearing.
Well, that doesn't add up at all. So he has a wound, but it went through the shirt without making a hole.
Yes. However, 3 years later at trial, suddenly the shirt had a corresponding bullet hole which had not been there.
Well, someone's tampered with the evidence.
The coroner had made multiple notes about not finding that bullet hole in the shirt during autopsy.
Well,
but then suddenly the shirt has a hole in it.
Well, you could imagine from a coroner's perspective, that would strike you as rather odd.
Yeah.
If there's not an obvious hole somewhere near the wound, even if it's a couple inches to the right or left. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me one bit that there would be some obvious notes in the record about that.
The jury also never heard about Larry Demery's employment at Crestline Mobile Homes, which was very close to where this body was dumped.
You said around a mile from the remains.
And there was no mention of how he worked with Hubert Deese. And of course, those phone calls, as I said earlier, that was not mentioned at all in trial. And if you remember, people didn't believe that Jordan's body was randomly dumped, that had to be based on someone's knowledge of this area, and that the person would know this dense swamp area and be able to navigate that. So that's kind of an interesting point, considering that Deese lived and worked within a mile from where this body was placed.
Right, so it stands to reason that he would be very familiar with the surrounding area.
A North Carolina reporter later came forward stating that in 1993, Larry Demery admitted he had been the trigger man killing James Jordan. Connie Brayboy, she is editor of the Carolina Indian Voice. She didn't share this information until 2015. In November of 2015, she signed an affidavit with the court documenting the conversation she had with Larry Demery back in 1993. In December of 2018, Chris Muma, who is Daniel Green's new attorney, she visited Larry Demery in prison. During a bombshell confession, Demery admitted that he lied at trial after being coerced by police. Larry said Daniel Green did not kill James Jordan. However, Larry never admitted that he was the gunman either. Chris Muma filed an affidavit in court regarding this conversation. that took place in 2018. Actual Innocence took on this case in 2016. They're seeking a new trial based on a violation of Green's due process rights, as well as ineffective counsel at his 1996 trial. In 2020, Larry Demery was granted parole. It was delayed for 1 year, and then in 2022, it was revoked.
Okay.
So Daniel Green continues fighting for an appeal. Yet others point out that Green has had over 100 infractions while serving time in the North Carolina prison system and still hasn't seemed to learn a lesson about right from wrong.
Now, I've got to say, over all the stories we've discussed, 100 infractions in a matter of years is a lot. It seems to be a lot, right?
Well, those infractions include everything from sex acts to assault with a weapon, disobeying orders, fighting, substance possession, and more.
All the things.
Right. So some people are like, okay, you're trying to get this guy a new trial, but look at his record. Do you really think that this guy's innocent?
Well, yeah. I mean, that would give you a bit of pause, and you would imagine if you are truly innocent and wrongfully convicted of murder and a life sentence, that the last thing on your mind would be tomfoolery. It would be trying to prove your innocence and keep your nose clean, because you don't want to add to your sentence and you don't want to look like a bad person.
100 infractions is an awful lot.
Well, I mean, there's been times you said 30 or 40 infractions, and that was viewed as a lot for an inmate to have. So 100 plus for all different types of things. It sounds like he does not like to follow the rules, and you can't tell him nothing.
Might be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it shows a lack of impulse control. It shows a bad view on authority and rules. I mean, it's not good. It's the types of behaviors you see from career criminals. I mean, I'm not saying that he is, but it's not a good look.
After Green and Demery were arrested, a convenience store clerk in Winnebago, which is about 8 miles south of Wilmington, told police that on July 26th or 27th, James Jordan, along with the two suspects, so James Jordan is with Larry Demery and Daniel Green, and that they came into the store where she worked. And she remembered the gold trim on the red Lexus. It stood out because it was a flashy car.
It really did. This car would stand out. You would remember seeing this car a day or two later.
This clerk remembered that she and James Jordan had a brief chat. There was a bread truck driver who was making a store delivery at the time and also remembered the incident, remembered the car, and remembered the clerk talking to James Jordan and seeing him with Larry Demery and Daniel Green. They were all together hanging out. It was...
Like they were fast friends.
Like they were friends.
So when as you were saying that, I was like, well, did she see that? Is she trying to just, insert herself into this big story, big local story? But now with another person totally removed, a third party corroborating her story to the letter, that's fairly compelling.
But guess what, Dylan? These witnesses, this information did not make it to trial. This was withheld.
I gotta say,
from evidence. And guess what? When Sheriff Stone was asked about this later, and why was this not mentioned, he denied this account, stating that the clerk and driver were mistaken, and that's why he never really followed up with it.
Oh, they both were mistaken, even though they remember exactly the same thing.
So in 1994, Hubert Stone gave an interview to GQ magazine in which he said, quote, "Anytime you look down the street and you see a black and an Indian guy, you've got crime. You know you're not supposed to look at things like that, but that's the way it is. If they're running together, something's up. We always know when we spot a car and see them, an Indian and a black, there's going to be some crime. We have to keep a firm hand on them."
Wow. There's a few problems with that statement, sir.
You think?
Jesus Christ.
And you're trying to sell me that you're a fair sheriff and that everything in your town is on the up and up, and this is what you're telling fucking GQ magazine?
That's not even coded.
Yeah.
That's outright
Hey, guess what?
profiling and racist.
Hubie Booby, your interview didn't age well.
When you see those people together, the blacks and the reds, you know it's going to be a bad time.
What the fuck?
Who even talks like that? You cracker ass son of a bitch.
Yeah, he is a cracker. And when the reporter is asking him questions about James Jordan's murder, specifically why there was no blood in the Lexus, he summed it up as entry wounds. There usually won't be a lot of blood because victims suffer internal bleeding.
Yeah, there's they claim the round got hung up on a rib or hit a rib and stayed inside,
Yes.
so there wasn't an exit wound. But I gotta say, even with an entry wound in the
There's
chest
gonna
area,
be some blood
in the
splatter,
chest
you'd
area?
think, right?
there's going to be a drip or two, and let alone with your body being manipulated and moved around the car.
Yeah.
There's going to be a spot. I think there would be a pool of blood somewhere personally. But there's got to be smears. There's got to be some. What about when the round hits you? There could be some kind of impact spray or anything.
How about just like your body leaks and does weird things when you die anyway?
Yeah.
So there would be some fluid, I would think.
Yeah.
By the time you kill somebody and then transport their body and all that, I mean.
No, that's a great point, Heather. Even if they didn't find blood,
fluids settle.
They may find where the body started releasing fluids on the seat. These.
And when you die, your body's like, better out than in.
If that were to happen, these criminals or these murderers are not going to clean it. So there would be evidence of a scenario like that. So there's no fluids, no blood, no anything inside of the car where he was allegedly shot in the chest.
So the sheriff also added in the interview, quote, "These guys have been in so much trouble since they were young. They didn't really think. All they got on their minds was crime." They just wanted to go out and do the crimes, Dylan.
They're just doing the crime. That's what they do.
That's all they think about.
That's what they get up together and they go do crimes.
Them coloreds just do the crime. I mean, this guy. Okay.
I don't even have time to recount all the corrupt bullshit that surrounded this man.
I had to quote him directly just so we could make fun of this guy.
It worked.
What a tool bag. Okay. So for years, rumors of rampant corruption in the Robeson County Sheriff's Office. I mean, it was everywhere. We have this hostage situation. We've got people marching in the streets. We've got activists being murdered. District Attorney Johnson Britt said, quote, "It was nothing that anyone could really hang their hat on. Things that just on the surface didn't appear to be right. Britt noticed some deputies that were living well beyond their means, buying grandiose homes, expensive cars, motorcycles, boats, designer clothing. Complaints and allegations of corruption began surfacing during the course of investigations by the new district attorney, this guy, Johnson Britt. I'm assuming he's related to Joe Freeman Britt. I think it might be his son. Then in 2002, an informant came forward saying deputies had given him a handgun during a home invasion that they had disguised as a sting operation. Britt's suspicions intensified because information in a report filed by the deputies was missing. So was the gun, and it turned up later in a deputy's private locker. Britt asked the State Bureau of Investigation to look into the matter, marking the beginning of the largest investigation of police corruption in state history. And we talked about this a little bit during the Lumberton 3 case. Operation Tarnished Badge. In all, 22 lawmen, including former Sheriff Glenn Maynor, were charged with crimes including pirating satellite television signals, kidnapping, perjury, drug trafficking, armed robbery, and money laundering. Unfortunately, Sheriff Stone had already retired by the time the internal investigation happened, so he was never formally looked at for his possible involvement in drug trafficking, the protection racket, or planting evidence, setting up innocent people, or the fact that there were several murders that took place, shootings of unarmed people.
Yes, very convenient things that made problems go away for the sheriff.
Yeah. In June of 2006, the U.S. Attorney's Office handed down a 10-page indictment against 3 former deputies, Roger Taylor, Charles Strickland, and Steve Lovin, all of whom worked in the Sheriff's Drug Enforcement Unit. The indictment detailed illegal acts the men allegedly committed between 1995 and 2004, including the arson of 2 homes and a business, assault, theft of public money, distribution of drugs, and money laundering. No one was ultimately convicted of the arson, though.
Wow. Dude, this is exactly what, if you were to outline how extortion and racketeering and, protecting the drug trade or any of that, these are the types of things you would imagine. Assaults, you're beating people up, telling them to keep quiet. Arsons.
This is a bunch of thugs.
Arsons always
Thugs with badges, bud.
Yes, always used by people to threat to make people go away. So, and 22 deputies, I do remember us talking about this. That's not just a couple of bad apples. That's
like a whole fucking department.
That's a culture of corruption that's been happening for a long time, so long that a lot of the people around it are comfortable being
Well, and
part
they
of
say
it.
shit rolls downhill, right? So if you've got the sheriff at the top of the shit pile,
Yeah.
and he's okay with all this, well, it's going to roll downhill. Everybody's going to think it's okay.
Well, yeah, if he's
Right?
going to take money, I'm going to take money too. Why not? Because he's got a nice boat and a car. I want those things.
Well, the indictment said the lawman used marijuana as payment for committing arson, provided drugs to confidential informants, and stole thousands of dollars during 6 highway stops on Interstate 95. As the investigation continued, 4 remaining members of the drug unit were indicted: James Hunt, Billy Hunt, Kevin Mears, and Joey Smith. While those investigations unfolded, there were other bizarre crimes that implicated 2 deputies. Vincent St. Clair and Patrick Ferguson were accused of kidnapping and robbing 2 alleged drug dealers from Virginia Beach, Virginia, in February of 2004.
Damn.
During an interview, Ferguson told investigators that he and Sinclair had been involved in as many as 25 similar robberies. So finally, the sheriff's department is brought down.
Finally, but then Roberson, or the original sheriff there, he gets right off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Never be held accountable.
He died in 2008,
Okay.
just so you know.
He was probably on his nice boat.
Yeah.
So this is such a wild story. I mean, it almost overshadows Mr. Jordan's
Now,
murder.
I have to tell you what the sheriff said. After he had retired, and these 22 officers, including the new sheriff, Maynor, I mean, some of these deputies had worked under Stone. They were his guys. But this is what he had to say, quote, "When I left, I don't believe anyone could say they were not real clean, straightforward guys. With no supervision, over time, they changed."
Shit. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that a bit.
So when you look at the whole of this case, can we honestly say that Larry Demery and Daniel Green got a fair trial, that the investigation was conducted in a
Professional manner.
in the way it should have been, that they were really investigated, that the evidence was solid? I mean, at this point, there's so much manipulation, and the sheriff's got his little sticky hands in there, and he's corrupt, and the whole department's corrupt. And I mean, I'm just not even sure. Do we have the right guys? And did they get a fair trial?
I honestly,
Because when all the evidence is presented, I would have a very hard time as a juror sentencing this guy to life in prison and saying, yes, without a doubt, I think this guy Green was involved.
I agree.
He did this.
I don't think I could. I don't think I could after all that. There's no way. And the answers to those questions you put forth, or I don't know. I don't feel sure about anything.
I mean, I really don't. I thought I knew this case, and I was like, oh, okay. But now I don't think I know anything. I really, even after all this research, I'm not really sure what happened.
Right.
And I am not going to I mean, sometimes we've covered cases where I'm like, this is a travesty, and I can't believe this person was railroaded. I'm not saying that in the situation, because I think Larry Demery and Daniel Green were involved in some shady shit.
I agree with that. Certainly.
They had done some bad things.
Young, dumb.
So was it a stretch to think they've committed robberies, that they robbed this man, murdered him, dumped his body? They may have very well done those things. But just based on the evidence, I don't know. And then you've got these other factors, like the sheriff's son somehow might be involved. The sheriff's covering up this evidence. It's not being presented.
Yeah, Mr. Green has a public defender. There's all kinds of what I would consider important evidence left out of the defense's case there. And so, it's a tough one.
And just like the murder of Julian Pierce, it seems like the sheriff just picked 2 random people who were like troublemakers and pinned the murder on them.
And
then one of them just mysteriously killed himself with some gun that wasn't, that the breach was, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right?
none of it made sense.
So, I mean, in this case, I have a hard time. I'm almost feeling like, did the sheriff just randomly pick these two guys that he knew were troublemakers and built a case? Or he knew maybe that they were involved and they had the car, but they didn't do the murder. I mean, I don't know. It's just a strange case.
It is strange, and let's from everything else you told us about.
I'm bringing this up in a very inarticulate way. I'm sorry, but
no,
just
it's late,
the whole thing
but
is
it's a big story.
mind blowing to me. I don't know. I feel like I'm left with more questions than answers.
I do too, but that is the main reason I really enjoyed this week's case with you, Heather. And I think at first, when you first said we're going to do James Jordan's murder, his story, I was like, okay, cool. But I really did. I was like, oh, okay, that was a well-known case, but it's from the Carolinas. Let's do it. I learned so much, but at the same time, I have so many more questions. And but yeah, it was a very important story, and thank you so much for bringing your type of research to a story like this.
I know I was a little bit all over the place, but I was just trying to give everybody a broad view of everything that was going on at the time.
Right.
My resources for today, a ton of newspaper articles, the Charlotte Observer, the Raleigh News and Observer, GQ Magazine. There was also a Freevee documentary called Moment of Truth. It's like a 5-part docuseries about this case. Definitely worth a watch if you want to know more. There are interviews with Daniel Green, his attorneys, a lot of people involved in the case.
That was very well made. And I think if you do want to just throw something on the background and learn more about the story and put some faces to some of these people, it's definitely worth a watch.
There's also a podcast that was produced by WRAL Studios, which is like a local, like a Raleigh news station. They have Follow the Truth Pod, which is dedicated to the story, and it's very informative as well.
All right, Miss Heather, thank you so much for that. Really enjoyed your story this week, and I cannot wait to see what you do next.
Dylan, we have a listener stories. We need to get through that. We need to get that episode out. So I'm very excited. Thanks to everyone who sends us those listener stories. If you have a story you would like to submit, you can email that to mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. You can send it you can slide in my DMs on the Insta if you want, as the kids say.
I'll allow it.
You can slide into my DMs it's Appalachian True Crime. And then sometimes people send us little direct messages on X.
Yes, that is awesome.
It used to be Twitter.
And this one time I'm going to overlook y'all being up in my wife's DMs because she loves it when you do that.
Man, ain't nobody in my DMs.
All right, so we hope this podcast finds you happy, safe, and fed. Right?
Okay, Daddy Dylan.
And we love our patrons. Thank you for supporting the show over there on patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. That's it.
Okay.
Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast.
Honey, just...
Anyway, thank you, patrons. Thank everyone that listened this week.
Yeah, if you want to sign up for patreon.com right now, it's a great way to support the show, get yourself some bonus content, and for as low as $1 a month, you can help us out.
You can help us out, and you can get all up in our Haunted Castle series we're doing, y'all.
We do have a Haunted Castle series right now that we are covering on Patreon. We're going to have a brand new Haunted Castle episode out this week.
I can't wait.
For those patrons. All right, Dylan, I'm going to say goodnight.
All right, bye.
Bye.